Hey everyone, and welcome back to the EMT Spot's Blood Pressure Podcast. I'm Samuel
Yeah.
Harrison, your host for today's deep dive, and with me, I have the fantastic Olivia Harper.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
All right, so today we're going to be tackling something, a topic that's pretty important and that might make you sit up a little straighter, going deep into high blood pressure and strokes. And here's the thing, it's not just something for our grandparents anymore.
Right.
We're seeing this stuff pop up more and more in younger adults.
Yeah.
So imagine you're in your 20s or 30s feeling great, maybe hitting the gym, maybe not, and suddenly, bam, a stroke.
It's scary.
It's a scary thought, right? And
Yeah.
it's happening more often than we might think. Olivia, what's the deal here? Why are we seeing this trend in younger folks?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. It is scary, and it is becoming more and more common, and the connection lies with high blood pressure, or HBP. It's like a silent ticking time bomb
Yeah.
that many people don't even realize they have, and it's a major risk factor for both ischemic and hemorrhagic strokes.
Okay, hold on a second. Hemorrhagic stroke. That sounds intense.
Yeah.
Can you break that down for us? Like, what exactly is going on there, and why should younger adults be concerned about it?
Sure. So, in the simplest terms, a hemorrhagic stroke is when a blood vessel in your brain decides to spring a leak or even burst completely. And this bleeding, it can really damage those brain cells and disrupt normal brain function.
That's definitely not something you want to deal with.
But not at all. And what's even more concerning is that we're seeing two specific types of hemorrhagic strokes popping up in younger adults, and that's subarachnoid hemorrhage and intracerebral hemorrhage. So think of subarachnoid hemorrhage as bleeding between the brain and those thin tissues that cover it, while intracerebral hemorrhage is bleeding within the actual brain tissue itself. And the numbers are pretty clear for subarachnoid hemorrhage. It's about 3 to 6 cases per 100,000 individuals each year.
Wow.
And for intracerebral hemorrhage, it's 2 to 7 per 100,000.
So it's not like a super rare thing.
No, not at all. And this is why we're concerned, because these strokes are not just something that older people need to worry about.
Right. So no matter what age you are, you could be at risk.
Exactly.
So what's causing this surge in high blood pressure among young adults?
Well, there are a number of factors at play here, but let's start with something we're all pretty familiar with: obesity.
Oh, yeah.
You see, when you carry extra weight, it's not just about how your clothes fit.
Right.
It puts a really big strain on your heart and your entire circulatory system.
Makes sense.
Your heart has to pump harder to move all that blood around.
Oh, yeah.
And this extra effort leads to, you guessed it, higher blood pressure.
It's like a pump, right? Like if you got to pump more water through the same size pipe, it's going to take more pressure.
Exactly. Think of it like trying to force a massive amount of water through a tiny little straw. It takes a lot of pressure.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not just about vanity. It's about taking care of our hearts from the inside out. And speaking of things that impact our health from the inside out, let's talk about the food we put into our bodies.
Good idea.
We've all heard about the importance of a healthy diet, but how does what we eat directly affect blood pressure, especially in younger people?
Well, you are what you eat, right?
Yeah.
And when we talk about unhealthy diets in relation to high blood pressure, we're mainly focusing on diets packed with salt, unhealthy fats, and processed foods.
The usual suspects.
The usual suspects, exactly, and these can contribute to high blood pressure in a couple of ways. First, they often lead to weight gain,
Right, which we just talked about.
which we just talked about exactly. But there's more to it than that. For example, high salt intake makes your body retain more fluid, and that directly increases your blood pressure.
It's amazing how much salt affects so many processes in our body.
Absolutely, it does. And then unhealthy fats, especially those saturated and trans fats, can raise your cholesterol levels, which then lead to plaque buildup in your arteries. This buildup narrows the arteries, making it harder for blood to flow smoothly. And guess what that leads to?
Higher blood pressure.
Higher blood pressure, exactly.
It's crazy how all these like little things can add up and really affect our health.
It really is.
I think we often think of like diet as, like, oh, do I fit my jeans or not? But it's so much more than that. It's really about your heart health and your blood pressure, even at a young age. So what else is contributing to this rise in HBP?
Well, let's move on to lack of physical activity.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, we spend hours sitting at desks, commuting, binge watching our favorite shows.
You're talking about me.
Maybe so, but the truth is, our bodies weren't really designed to be couch potatoes 24/7.
Right.
And when we're inactive, our blood flow slows down. This might not seem like a big deal, but over time, it actually forces your heart to work harder to circulate that blood, and that leads to an increase in blood pressure.
So our bodies are like, hey, get up and move.
Exactly.
It's not just about our physical health, though, right? Our mental well-being plays a role, too. I'm talking about stress. We all experience it, but how does chronic stress, that feeling of constantly being on edge, how does that contribute to HBP in younger adults?
Stress is a sneaky culprit, while some stress is normal. And even healthy chronic stress, the kind that hangs around like an unwelcome house guest, can really wreak havoc on your body.
Right.
It triggers the release of hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, which then cause your blood vessels to constrict, making it even harder for blood to flow. And what happens when blood flow is restricted?
Higher blood pressure.
You got higher blood pressure. It's like your body is in a constant state of fight or flight,
Right.
which is great for short bursts, but not so great in the long run.
Yeah, so it's not just in our heads. Stress is really physically changing our bodies
It is.
and affecting our blood pressure.
Yeah.
Wow. So let's move on to a big one. And this is a message I think we need to just hammer home, especially for our younger listeners, and that's smoking.
Yes.
It's not just about wrinkles and bad breath.
Right.
It's about serious damage to your heart and your blood vessels.
Yeah.
So, Olivia, can you break down the connection between smoking and high blood pressure, especially for younger adults who may be thinking, oh, I've got plenty of time to worry about that later?
You're absolutely right. Smoking is like throwing a wrench into your cardiovascular system's delicate machinery. You see, nicotine and the other chemicals found in tobacco smoke, they are vasoconstrictors,
Yeah.
which means they cause your blood vessels to narrow.
Right.
This narrowing makes it harder for blood to flow,
So more pressure.
leading to an immediate increase in blood pressure, but the damage doesn't stop there over time. Smoking also damages the lining of your blood vessels, making them more susceptible to plaque buildup and hardening, which further increases blood pressure and sets the stage for serious cardiovascular problems down the road.
So those consequences are not something to just brush off and worry about when you're older.
No, they can start affecting you much earlier than you might think.
And speaking of things that can have a rapid and detrimental effect, let's talk about drug abuse. Our research mentions specifically cocaine and amphetamines as culprits in this high blood pressure story.
Right.
So how do these drugs affect blood pressure, especially in young adults who may be underestimating the risks?
Well, cocaine and amphetamines are stimulants, and they basically send your cardiovascular system into overdrive.
Oh, boy.
They cause your heart rate and blood pressure to skyrocket,
Yeah.
putting immense strain on your heart and blood vessels.
Wow.
This kind of intense surge in blood pressure can lead to irreversible damage and even trigger a stroke or a heart attack. It's like revving your car engine to the max for hours on end. Eventually, something's going to give.
Right.
And what makes it especially concerning for younger adults is this sense of invincibility.
That's very true.
They think they can handle anything and that the damage won't catch up with them. But the reality is, drug abuse can have serious and lasting consequences even after a single use.
Wow. That's really important, and I think it's important to remember that the choices we make now can have those lasting impacts on our health even at a young age.
Absolutely.
So we've talked a lot about lifestyle factors,
We have.
but our genes played a role too, right?
Of course they do.
Olivia, how does family history contribute to HBP in younger adults?
Well, you're right. While we have a lot of control over our health through our lifestyle choices, genetics can deal us a bit of a hand. So if you have a family history of hypertension, you are more likely to develop it yourself, even at a younger age. It's not a guarantee, but it definitely increases your risk.
So if high blood pressure runs in your family, it's even more important to be proactive about those lifestyle factors that we've been discussing.
Exactly.
Okay, so finally, let's touch on another factor that can contribute to HBP, and that's chronic medical conditions. Our research specifically mentioned kidney disease. So can you explain how kidney disease affects blood pressure?
Absolutely. Kidney disease can really throw a wrench in your body's blood pressure regulation system. When your kidneys aren't functioning as they should, they can't effectively filter waste products and excess fluid from your blood.
Uh-oh.
This buildup then leads to an increase in blood volume, which, as we've discussed, puts more pressure on your heart and blood vessels, raising your blood pressure. It's like having a clogged filter in your body. Things start to back up and create problems.
Wow, Olivia, this has been so eye-opening.
It has been a lot of information.
We've uncovered a lot of information about high blood pressure and strokes in young adults, and it's honestly a lot to take in.
It is.
But I think the good news is there's a lot we can do to fight back.
Absolutely there is.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about prevention.
Okay.
Our research outlines several tips for preventing high blood pressure in younger adults. So where should we start?
Well, we've already touched on one of the most important ones, maintaining a healthy weight.
Right.
It's not just about fitting into those favorite jeans.
Right.
It's about reducing that strain on your heart and circulatory system.
So it sounds like healthy weight management is really the cornerstone of heart health.
I would say so.
But what about specific dietary changes? What are some key things younger adults can do to really eat their way to a healthier blood pressure?
Think of your diet as fuel for your heart.
Okay.
Focus on foods that are naturally low in sodium and unhealthy fats,
Right.
and rich in nutrients that support your cardiovascular health.
Oh, okay.
So lots of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and lean proteins.
Okay.
And try to limit those processed foods, sugary drinks, and anything loaded with saturated and trans fats.
So real food over processed food.
As much as possible, yes.
When possible.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And what about physical activity? How much exercise do we need to keep our blood pressure in check?
Aim for at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity aerobic activity per week spread throughout the week.
Okay.
And the great thing is, it doesn't have to be all at once.
Okay.
Even short bursts of activity throughout the day can add up and make a difference.
That's encouraging. Yeah. I can definitely fit in, a 10-minute walk here and there throughout the day or a quick bike ride.
Exactly.
Okay, now stress is a big one for me.
I understand.
And a lot of our listeners can relate. So what are some effective ways to manage stress and keep it from impacting our blood pressure?
Stress management is crucial, and there are a lot of great tools out there that you can use. So things like deep breathing exercises,
Right.
meditation, yoga, spending time in nature, listening to music, or engaging in hobbies you enjoy. These are all great ways to calm your mind and body.
Right.
The key is to find what works best for you and incorporate it into your daily routine.
I love that even just, a couple minutes of deep breathing can make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about another big one, tobacco. We've already discussed its harmful effects, but what specific advice do you have for younger adults regarding tobacco use?
The message is simple: avoid it like the plague.
Straightforward.
If you don't smoke, don't even think about starting. And if you do smoke, quitting is the single best gift you can give yourself and your heart.
I agree.
And the good news is that there are tons of resources available to help you kick the habit.
Yeah.
And the benefits of quitting start almost immediately. You'll be amazed at how much better you feel both physically and mentally.
That's fantastic to hear. Okay, so what about alcohol? Is it okay to indulge occasionally, or do we need to completely abstain to keep our blood pressure in check?
Well, moderation is key when it comes to alcohol.
Okay.
For healthy adults, that generally means up to 1 drink per day for women
Okay.
and up to 2 drinks per day for men.
Got it.
But keep in mind, this is just a general guideline, and what's considered moderate can vary depending on factors like your age, your health status, and any medications you might be using.
Right. So it's always best to talk to your doctor about what's right for you.
Absolutely. And it's also worth noting that even within these moderate limits, alcohol can still raise blood pressure in some individuals, especially those who are already predisposed to high blood pressure.
Good point. Okay, so now let's wrap up this part of our discussion with something that I think is often overlooked, but is incredibly important: regular blood pressure monitoring.
Yes, very important.
Why is this so crucial, especially for younger adults who may not think they're at risk for high blood pressure?
It's funny. People get oil changes for their cars and regular checkups for their pets, but they often neglect their own bodies.
That's so true.
Regular blood pressure monitoring is like getting a checkup for your heart and your blood vessels.
Right.
It's essential for early detection and management of potential issues.
So like preventative maintenance.
Exactly. The tricky thing is that high blood pressure often doesn't have any noticeable symptoms, especially in its early stages.
So it's a silent threat.
Exactly, which is why it's so important to be proactive about monitoring your blood pressure. But how often should we be checking it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you're generally healthy and don't have any risk factors for high blood pressure, getting it checked at least once every 2 years, starting at age 20, is a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, that's a good starting point. But if you do have risk factors such as a family history of high blood pressure or obesity or a sedentary lifestyle, your doctor might recommend more frequent monitoring.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what about home blood pressure monitoring? Is that something you recommend?
Home blood pressure monitoring can be a game changer.
Yeah.
It's a great way to stay on top of your numbers between those doctor visits and catch any potential fluctuations. Plus, it's empowering to take an active role in managing your health.
Right. And it's pretty easy to do.
It is.
So I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, folks, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of the TheEMTSpot's blood pressure podcast.
We have.
We talked about, what causes high blood pressure in younger adults. We talked about the importance of prevention. We talked about monitoring. But hold on tight because we're not done yet. In part two, we'll be delving into some fascinating natural remedies, and we'll explore how even small lifestyle tweaks can make a world of difference.
Looking forward to it.
So stay tuned.
Welcome back to the EMT Spot's Blood Pressure Podcast. You know, it's amazing how much power we have to influence our health just through simple lifestyle choices.
Absolutely.
Like choosing nutritious foods and, adding certain supplements to our routine can really make a difference.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because that's exactly what I wanted to dive into next.
Okay.
I'm really intrigued by these natural supplements that can help regulate blood pressure. Can you tell us more about those?
Sure, natural supplements can be a fantastic complement to a healthy lifestyle when it comes to managing blood pressure. But as with anything, it's crucial to talk to your doctor before adding any new supplements, especially if you have any health conditions or are taking any medications.
Yeah, that's a great point. Supplements aren't a magic bullet, and personalized advice from a healthcare professional is always the best way to go.
Yeah.
So, in general, what are some of the natural supplements that have shown promise in helping regulate blood pressure?
Well, magnesium, potassium, and calcium are some of the all-star players in the world of natural blood pressure management. They've been well researched, and they're commonly recommended because they play important roles in regulating blood vessel function and fluid balance, both of which can impact blood pressure.
Okay, so let's unpack those one by one. First up, magnesium. How does that help regulate blood pressure?
Magnesium is like a natural chill pill for your blood vessels.
Okay,
It's a muscle relaxant, and that includes the muscles in your blood vessels.
interesting.
So when those vessels can relax and expand more easily, blood flows more smoothly, and that translates to lower pressure. Studies have even shown that taking magnesium supplements can lead to modest reductions in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure.
So it's like giving our blood vessels a little spa day,
Right.
helping them unwind and let go of tension. I love that. What about potassium? How does that contribute to healthy blood pressure regulation?
Well, potassium is sodium's balancing act partner.
Right.
Remember how we talked about high salt intake increasing blood pressure? Well, potassium swoops in and helps flush that excess sodium out of your system through your urine. Less sodium hanging around means lower blood pressure.
Ah, so it's like potassium is sodium's superhero sidekick,
Exactly.
keeping it in check. And where can we find good sources of potassium in our diet?
You're in luck because potassium is abundant in lots of fruits and vegetables, so load up on those bananas, avocados, sweet potatoes, spinach beans. They're all potassium powerhouses.
Sounds delicious.
Okay.
Okay, last but not least, let's talk about calcium. How does calcium play a role in blood pressure regulation?
Calcium is the muscle maestro.
Right.
It's essential for proper muscle function, including the muscles that control our heart rate and blood vessel constriction.
Right.
And studies have shown that getting enough calcium in our diet can help lower blood pressure, especially for people who might be calcium deficient.
So it's all about maintaining that perfect mineral symphony in our bodies.
Exactly.
Where can we find good sources of calcium?
Well, dairy products like milk, yogurt, cheese are classic calcium sources. But if dairy isn't your thing, or you follow a vegan diet, don't worry, there's a plenty of plant-based options out there too, like leafy green vegetables, fortified plant milks, and tofu.
It's amazing how much we can influence our health just through simple everyday choices.
Absolutely.
But I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier, and that's quitting smoking. We know it's a health hazard in countless ways, but can you elaborate a little bit on the specific benefits of quitting smoking when it comes to blood pressure?
Quitting smoking is like hitting the reset button on your cardiovascular health. It's one of the most impactful things you can do for your heart and your blood vessels. In fact, just 20 minutes after your last cigarette, your blood pressure and your heart rate start to drop, reversing that immediate spike caused by nicotine. Talk about fast result.
Wow, 20 minutes. That's incredible. It shows how much our bodies want to heal
Yes, they do.
once we get rid of those harmful toxins, so it's never too late to quit.
Never too late.
Now, before we move on, I want to touch on something we briefly mentioned earlier, and that's alcohol. We talked about moderation being key, but can you kind of elaborate on what moderation actually means when it comes to blood pressure?
Sure. When we talk about moderate alcohol consumption, we're generally referring to up to 1 drink per day for women
Okay.
and up to 2 drinks per day for men. But keep in mind that this is just a general guideline, and what's considered moderate can vary depending on factors like age, health status, and medications.
So, it's always a good idea to chat with your doctor about what's right for you.
Absolutely. They can help you figure out what moderate means for your unique situation.
And it's worth noting that even within those moderate limits, alcohol can still raise blood pressure in some people, especially those who might already be prone to high blood pressure.
That's true.
Okay, so now let's talk about something that's often overlooked but is incredibly important: regular blood pressure monitoring. Why is this so crucial, especially for younger adults who may not think they're at risk?
It's funny. People get oil changes for their cars, they get regular checkups for their pets, but they often neglect their own bodies.
It's so true.
Regular blood pressure monitoring is like getting a checkup for your heart and blood vessels. It's essential for early detection and management of potential issues. The tricky thing is that high blood pressure often doesn't have any noticeable symptoms, especially in its early stages.
It's like a stealthy ninja lurking in the shadows. That's why it's so important to be proactive about monitoring our blood pressure. But how often should we be checking it?
If you're generally healthy and don't have any risk factors for high blood pressure, getting it checked at least once every 2 years, starting at age 20, is a good rule of thumb.
Okay.
But if you do have risk factors, such as a family history of high blood pressure or obesity or a sedentary lifestyle, your doctor might recommend more frequent monitoring.
That makes sense. So what about home blood pressure monitoring? Is that something you recommend?
Home blood pressure monitoring can be a game changer. It's a great way to stay on top of your numbers between doctor visits and catch any potential fluctuations.
Yeah.
Plus, it's empowering to take an active role in managing your own health.
Right. And it's pretty easy to do, too.
It is.
Okay, well, folks, we've covered a lot of ground in this part of the EMT Spot's blood pressure podcast. We talked about those incredible natural supplements, magnesium, potassium, and calcium, and how they can help regulate blood pressure. We also delved into the life-changing benefits of quitting smoking and emphasized the importance of moderation when it comes to alcohol. And of course, we stressed the critical role of regular blood pressure monitoring, whether it's at the doctor's office or in the comfort of your own home. But guess what? We're not done yet in part 3. We'll bring it all together with some final thoughts and some key takeaways to help you navigate the world of blood pressure and really take control of your heart health. Welcome back to the EMT Spot's Blood Pressure Podcast. We've been on quite a journey exploring high blood pressure and strokes in younger adults, and it's been pretty eye-opening, to say the least.
It has.
I'm feeling a lot more informed, and I would even say a little more optimistic about our ability to really take charge of our heart health.
I agree with you there. It's easy to get kind of lost in all the information out there, but at the end of the day, it's really empowering to realize that even small changes to our lifestyle can make a huge difference for our blood pressure and overall well-being.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive, what would you say is the most important message you want our listeners to take away from our conversation?
I think the key takeaway here is that high blood pressure is a serious condition, but it's often preventable and manageable, especially if we catch it early.
Yeah.
And that means being proactive, paying attention to our lifestyle choices, keeping tabs on our blood pressure, and working closely with our healthcare providers.
I love that, being proactive, taking ownership of our health, and not just waiting for something to go wrong before we take action.
Yeah.
So what are some of those most impactful lifestyle changes people can make to lower their risk of high blood pressure and stroke?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, but those big hitters are maintaining a healthy weight, eating a balanced diet that's low in sodium and unhealthy fats, getting regular physical activity, finding healthy ways to manage stress, and of course, steering clear of smoking and excessive alcohol consumption.
It sounds like a recipe for a happy and healthy life.
It really does.
And it's encouraging to remember that, these changes don't have to be these drastic overnight transformations. Even small gradual changes can add up over time and make a big impact.
Exactly. It's all about finding what works for you and making the sustainable changes that you can stick with for the long haul. It's not about perfection, it's about progress.
Beautifully said. Well, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into high blood pressure and strokes in younger adults. We hope you found this conversation informative and empowering. Remember, knowledge is power, and by taking charge of our health, we can lower our risk of these serious conditions and live longer, healthier lives.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on the EMT Spot's Blood Pressure Podcast. I'm Olivia Harper.
And I'm Samuel Harrison. Be sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share this episode with your friends and family. Until next time. Stay healthy